All right. Hello again, Avengers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is Daily Vlog 2025, number 243, I think. Again, math is hard. Stay in school. 90 to drink. All right, so I was watching a video today, as one does. And apparently Paizo has announced that they're going to change how they are publishing their adventure paths. For anyone that doesn't know, the way that pre-written Pathfinder and Paizo in general, so I think it also references Starfinder as well, though I don't know if there's Starfinder adventure paths or not. I assume there are, because that's how a lot of game manufacturers make some of their money. Anyway, the way that Paizo has done their pre-written adventures is they don't give you an entire adventure in a single book. What they do or what they used to do, is they generally would have two big pre-written adventures per year that were released monthly. And each adventure would have 6 books. So you would have 6 books for this adventure path, and they all kind of linked together telling one story, but they were 6 different purchases and everything like that. And they put out books all year. So you'd have 6 months of one, 6 months of another, which is not that different from how D&D does it, and most other adventurers do it. The big difference being, instead of getting monthly pieces of adventures, you just get the entire adventure in one book. And for a while, D&D was putting 1 to 2 hardcover adventures out per year, so very similar. Apparently, what's happening with Paizo now is they're changing how they're doing things. Because again, they would give you basically 6 pieces of an adventure. You'd have to buy each one individually, and then later on, they would sell compilations, which is basically the entire adventure path in one book. And they've apparently recently announced that that's effectively going to be the default going forward, which is, again, how most other tabletop manufacturers tend to do it. They will release an entire adventure as one book, and they just have less publications per year, but you get roughly the same amount of adventuring time. So this is, my understanding is, it is causing, and I wouldn't really say drama, but a lot of people are talking about it because it's this is the way that Pathfinder has been releasing adventures since it first came out in 2007. Like, the adventure path system has been how they always did that. And in addition to adventure paths, you also had Pathfinder Society adventures coming out fairly regularly as well. And they mentioned there's going to be some slight changes to how Pathfinder Society stuff works. The biggest of which being, old Pathfinder Society stuff was aimed at about a 3 to 4 hour mark. The new stuff is going to be closer to 2 to 3 hours. And that's mostly designed to make it easier to play at friendly local game stores. Because things like, fun fact, things like the D&D Encounters program, or which is what eventually turned into the Adventures League, most game shops schedule 3-hour sessions for those, not 4. 4-hour sessions are conventions. Game stores tend to do 3. So that all makes sense. And again, it's kind of like Paizo is finally jumping on the boat that literally everybody else has been running on for forever. Again, I mean, when you look at like, Essence 20 stuff, they put out a single adventure. And I will say most of the adventures for like Essence 20 tend to be a lot shorter than something like Descent into Avernus or Dungeon of the Mad Mage or anything like that. But they work along the same kind of principle. So it got me thinking, because I've mentioned this before. There are a lot of dungeon masters that I know personally, and that I have seen on the interwebs and other things like that, that are kind of hyper against the idea of running something pre-written. And a lot of it comes down to be blunt, a lot of it comes down to ego, because the idea I hear most often is like, well, though that's for people that don't know how to play the game or how to run things. If you're a real dungeon master that actually knows what you're doing, you don't need someone to write your stuff for you. You can just run and create real stories. And so, like I said, it's mostly an ego thing. But it got me thinking, because of that, I know there are a lot of people that simply don't know how to run pre-written adventures. And with how many pre-written adventures exist, specifically for D&D 5th edition, it's kind of hard to figure out if you wanted to run a pre-written adventure, even what to look at. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, is just kind of give an overall overview of, hey, this is how you can run one of these long form pre-written adventures. Like, I know I've already kind of talked about how to run like one shots and stuff like that are pre-written, but these longer pre-written adventures get significantly, I think a lot of people get significantly more intimidated by them, because it's not like a single adventure. It's an adventure that's designed to take you from like 1 to 12, or with some of the early ones all the way up to level to 20. And so that's a lot of stuff. So yeah. First things first. So pre-written adventures, and I don't have a physical book in front of me, but you can see I've got lots of them all over. Like this shelf here. Where is it? There. This shelf there. That is all source books and pre-written adventures that I've collected. I actually don't even know what I have over there anymore. Yeah, just lots of stuff. Lots of it. So, the thing with running a pre-written campaign as opposed to an adventure, which would be like a single contained thing, is understanding the kind of overarching plot line that your characters are going to be dealing with. Good example to kind of start off with the first 5th edition long form adventure, Tyranny of Dragons. When Tyranny of Dragons was first released, it was actually released as 2 different books. You had Horde of the Dragon Queen, and then The Rise of Tiamat. And anyone that was playing D&D at that particular point in time will probably tell you, never attempt to run Tyranny of Dragons. It was a horrible book. It was super poorly written, blah, blah. That's not true, but it's not exactly false. Horde of the Dragon Queen, especially Horde of the Dragon Queen, because it was the first, was a rough campaign to run, because they really didn't understand D&D 5th edition well enough to do anything kind of interesting. And so some of the encounters are not balanced super well. Some of the plot points kind of have you going, okay, we're doing stuff here. Okay, 2 months later, you're over here. And it feels kind of jarring and things like that. But the adventure itself is actually really, really interesting. It's rooted in a lot of old school Forgotten Realms lore. And especially the final battle in it, spoiler alert, you actually get to go up against Tiamat as she is being raised out of hell because she got banished to one of the 7 layers of hell forever ago. And the whole point of the Tyranny of Dragons is this cult called the Dragon Cult wants to bring her back. And depending on the choices that you make in the adventure, she does come back, and you have to deal with. And Tiamat is not like a dragon fight. Tiamat is the dragon fight. Tiamat herself is hundreds of feet tall. Compared to the characters, each one of her heads, and she's got 5 of them, is the size of a small building. So the fight itself is absolutely epic because you have Tiamat literally coming out. You have a bunch of dragon priests trying to do all these other things. Like, it's a really, really intense thing. So when you're looking at something like this, and this is actually the fact that it's 2 different books instead of just one book actually makes it slightly easier to kind of deal with. But the first thing that you want to do is you want to just very briefly go over every single chapter of the book. Now, I don't mean, read every single word or everything, but basically go to each chapter, because generally these books, each chapter is going effectively to be its own little adventure that kind of feeds into the overall story. So you go into each chapter, you figure out kind of what the goals of the characters are going to be in there, what the goals of the bad guys are going to be in there, and take any notes that make it easier for you to remember. Once you have kind of an overarching idea of, okay, this is what's going on, then you can start kind of prepping it for your players. I've mentioned this before. I am sick to death of Session 0. And what I mean by that is Session 0 has turned into this kind of mythical cure-all that if you run a Session 0, you will never have any problems running any TTRPG. And if you don't run a Session 0, you are a horrible monster that deserves to die. Neither of those things are true. Most of the campaigns that I run have never had a Session 0. I do individual character creation with every one of my players. I pitch them the idea of this is a story, and then we work together to create the characters. And this is with players that I've known for years and people that I'm literally meeting for the first time when we're helping to build their characters. However, there are some benefits. It's not that Session 0s are bad. They're just not as necessary as people claim they are. However, when you've decided to run a pre-written campaign, Session 0 can be a really useful tool for you to know what aspects of the campaign you really should look into more. And basically, the thing that you want to kind of focus on is get kind of an idea of what your players enjoy and what they don't enjoy. If you have players that are really, really into role-playing, then after, again, getting the kind of basic overview of this is where the plot goes, really role-play heavy parties, you want to really do a deep dive into the big NPCs in the adventure. What are their motivations? What are the things that they want? And does that put them absolutely at odds with the party? Are there certain situations where their goals may align with the party's goals? They might want to work together. And especially, what is their motivations? Because the players are probably going to try to manipulate them in some way, shape, or form. Whether that is trying to get a one up on them in combat, or trying to avoid combat altogether by coming up with different ideas to come to solutions. So, for parties that are much more kind of role playing focused, you really want to focus on the NPCs. Um, Even going as far as making either note cards or uh, a millinote board or whatever you want to do so that you have access to their information as quickly as possible. On the other side, if you've got party members that are much more into kind of the combat and stuff like that, well, then you want to focus your prep on knowing, okay, these are the battle maps that we're using. If the adventure doesn't provide battle maps for certain things, like maybe there's random encounter tables, it's probably not a bad idea to either buy some generic or find some generic maps that you can just go, we're having a fight on the side of a road as we're traveling between one city and another. Well, then we'll use this forest map, or we'll use this grassy plains map, just so they have something to kind of dig their teeth into. And then also get to know your monsters as stat blocks. Now, you don't actually have to prep combat stuff more than maybe one session before you actually get to it. Like, you don't need to know how the Tiamat battle is going to go when you're still in greenest. But knowing what encounters they are likely to get into, because a lot of, especially in this one, but in most pre-written campaigns, you will have these little dungeons that you get to go into that will just have kind of a collection of different encounters and things like that. So going along with that and understanding, okay, this is each individual battle, maybe make some notes about, okay, these particular stat blocks work best if you do this, this, and this. Those are always useful. If you have players that are much more into kind of puzzle solving and stuff like that, this tends to be the one where it's your mileage is going to vary based on the adventure that you're running. Tyranny of Dragons is mostly role playing and combat. There really aren't that many puzzles in this particular adventure. So if your players do like puzzles, this is where understanding what that overarching plot is, that first step that we talked about, is going to be in your favor. Because if that's what your players like, then you can actually remove combat encounters and replace them with trap encounters, with other kinds of puzzles and the things like that. If I remember correctly, I think it's Xanathar's guide. You look it up real quick before I say the wrong thing. Volo's, Xanathar's, or is it Tasha's? Just have to look. Maybe Tasha's. Yeah, so Tasha's Cauldron of Everything has an entire section called Puzzles. And the entire point of Puzzles is to give you a bunch of pre-written puzzles that you can really just insert into any campaign that you want without having to design everything yourself. And again, if you understand the idea of templating, you can use those to create your own puzzles. So running something like Tyranny of Dragons for a party that is very kind of puzzle focused is still very, very doable. It just takes a little bit of extra work. The other kind of result that you could get is going to be people that either don't know what they like, or a mixture of people liking a lot of different things. And the best thing to do at that point is kind of play it by ear. Run The first chapter absolutely as written. It's got some role-playing encounters. It's got some combat encounters. There's really no puzzles in there, but feel free to put like maybe one puzzle in there and see how the players react to that. And then as things keep going, again, by understanding what the overarching plot is, you also know what encounters in each campaign are really important to keep, and what ones they're like, you know what, we can just replace this with a puzzle, or we can replace this with a trap or a role-playing encounter, and it's really not going to affect the overarching plot, which is why I mentioned learn the overarching plot first, because that's what's going to get you going. Now, the final thing that most people are worried about when running a pre-written campaign is what happens when our players don't follow the directions. Pre-written campaigns are not exclusively quote-unquote linear, where you have to do this and then have to do that. However, they do have a plot that they're trying to tell. So there is a linearity. I think that's a word. There's an aspect of being linear in them, because you have to get to the next thing. So what happens when the players go off the written path? Well, there's a bunch of different things that you can do. One, you can insert your own stuff that kind of fits with the theme. Again, understanding that overarching plot also means understanding that just because the players aren't interacting with the plot doesn't mean that the plot isn't moving forward. The plot is going to continue moving forward. The bad guys exist even if the players aren't next to them. So if the players go off to Waterdeep for a month to go, mess around with Undermountain or something like that, when they come out, the plot is going to have moved forward, and because they weren't there to stop the cult of the dragon, they're in a significantly better place than they were before. So don't feel bad if your players start kind of going off the written path. You can just allow them to go kind of do other things, or something else that tends to work relatively well is just because they've decided to take a left turn as I point right, doesn't mean that it completely takes them out of the story. Again, most of these campaigns are world affecting. So just because they're going, well, I don't want to deal with that. Tough titty, said the kitty, but the milk's still sweet. You're going to have to, because the cult of the dragon is everywhere and they're trying to take over the world. They're trying to kind of destroy it. So if they decide, well, we don't want to go to this particular place, we want to go this area, well, then allow them to do that. But just because they're in a different area doesn't mean, like, if they decide that we don't want to go to the Raiders camp, that's fine. It is a Raiders camp. They go out raiding. So they decide to go somewhere completely different. They can run into a raid that will kind of give them the idea of, oh, these people are going to continue causing trouble for us and causing trouble for everyone else until they're dealt with. So there's a bunch of different ways to kind of keep them on the quote-unquote right path. But to be blunt, if your players have agreed to play a pre-written campaign, it's because they want to experience the campaign. If you really have players that are kind of fighting against it and doing everything they can to avoid the campaign, then the problem is with the player's mindset, and in the idea that, hey, you guys agreed to play this campaign and you've done everything you can to not play this campaign. Do you guys want to play this campaign or not? Because if you don't, we can do something else. But part of you agreeing to play this pre-written adventure is also agreeing that, yeah, we're we're not going to go from A to B to C to D because that's kind of boring, and adventures really, or campaigns aren't really written that way. But we do understand that if we want to continue playing this campaign, we do have to kind of pick up the breadcrumbs that the DM is leaving for us. So yeah, from that point on, like I said, it really is see what your players are doing that week, take any notes that you need, and then go, well, if they did this week, then they're probably going to do this in the next week, and go from there. Running pre-written adventures is easier than running your own shit. And can be a lot of fun, because the other thing that's nice about pre-written adventures is because the entire adventure is written, you can do foreshadowing and other really, really interesting, fun stuff significantly easier, because you can put little breadcrumbs and ideas that show up in the very beginning of the adventure. And they do this quite often in these pre-written campaigns, that months down the line kind of comes back, and you get this really cool payoff, because since they're following a pre-written campaign, the writers already know where these players are going to be in that particular time, and so they can do more interesting things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's really, really not that difficult, and it can be very, very rewarding. Again, I cut my teeth running pre-written adventures, but I had already, like within the first year of me playing D&D, I was already writing my own custom adventures as well. So simply because you're running a pre-written adventure doesn't mean that you can't also run custom homebrew stuff. Most of the people I know that run pre-written adventures also have kind of homebrew stuff that they do on their own as well. The other big advantage of running pre-written stuff in general is if you want to do professional DMing through something like Start Playing, it is significantly harder to get people to sign on to a completely custom campaign than it is for you to go, hey, I'm running Curse of Strahd, who wants to play? It's always going to be easier to get players if they can be confident, oh, that's a good adventure, so I'm going to have a good time. So yeah, let's talk about specifically the pre-written adventures for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Now, as a reminder, for the longest time, I purchased every single book that Wizards of the Coast put out for 5th edition. So at this point, I think I own almost every adventure, both digital and physical copies, aside from Quest for the Infinite Staircase, because that came out right as I was starting to get kind of burnt out. And I think that's about it from the everything going pre 2024. As much as I'm really excited about Dragon Delves, I'm not going to purchase it right now because I just don't have the money with the other stuff, like the new Cypher, Who's You What's It, the Cypher backer kit, and then Where's Blades Kickstarter. I'm just not going to have money for Dragon Delves. But yeah, so, however, there are quite a few of these that I just purchased that I never kind of read through. So I'm just going to kind of talk about the ones that I have the most experience with, the most familiarity with. A few of them I did in-depth reviews on. So anyway, if we go way back to the beginning of 5th edition, again, the first adventure that was released was Hoard of the Dragon Queen, followed by Rise of Tiamat. It is now sold as one book called The Tyranny of Dragons. And as I mentioned before, this particular adventure is a bit rough. They didn't quite know what they were doing. They hadn't quite figured out balance and what stories 5th edition told the best, and so it is a little bit rough. That being said, it was an amazing display of all the cool things that you could do in 5th edition. Like I said before, the final fight with Tiamat is not only really, really impressive, but depending on what you do throughout the campaign, the fight can either be significantly easier or nearly impossible, because part of the run up to Tyranny of Dragons is each of the different chromatic dragons has a special dragon mask that the person that wields it gets all these cool things that they can do. Well, you find those throughout the adventure, or you can find them. You're not guaranteed to. And depending on how many of those masks the players have and are willing to use during that fight, it completely changes what you have to do to be able to take out Tiamat, or even if Tiamat is fully summoned. Like I said, if you're willing to put in a little bit of extra work to deal with the kind of jankiness of it, it is a really interesting, fun adventure. And it does go from level 1 all the way up to level 20. It is one of the longest adventures that they have. That's why they split it into 2 different books. Going forward, most of the adventures are going to end somewhere between level 12 and level 15. Some of them get up to level 18. But I don't think there's another level to the 20 adventure until, I want to say it's Dungeon of the Mad Mage is the other one that goes up to level 20, and it starts you at level 5. So, all right, so that's Tyranny of Dragon. Princes of the Apocalypse was the next one, and I have a bit of a history with this one. Princes of the Apocalypse is basically their kind of retelling of the Temple of Elemental Evil, but the big difference is the original Temple of Elemental Evil and the subsequent re-releases like Return to Temple of Elemental Evil and stuff like that is all based around this big mega dungeon that is the Temple of Elemental Evil. Princes of the Apocalypse is all about these 4 different elemental cults, which are the same cults from the Temple of Elemental Evil, but there isn't a singular location where there's this Temple of Elemental Evil where they all kind of coexist somewhat. Each one of the elemental cults has their own base of operations. They have their own motivations, and they all have a leader who has a magic weapon themed around their element, which makes dealing with those leaders actually pretty cool, because you can get those weapons and then the players can use them, and they're actually a lot of fun and very, very interesting. In addition to that, just like in the original Temple of Elemental Evil, while the elemental cults technically all work for the cult of elemental evil, they all have different motivations and they don't always line up. Well, in Prince of the Apocalypse, they're not all part of the same organization. They all follow some sort of elemental force, but they're not all really working together. They just happen to be working next to each other a lot. And the other big thing is they're trying to create these things called orbs of destruction, which is basically it makes this elemental storm happen in areas, and so you get to deal with those quite a few different times. The other thing that makes it a little different from the Temple of Elemental Evil is the big baddie. Spoiler alert for the Temple of Elemental Evil. At the end of the adventure, you don't fight a big, conglomeration of elemental powers. You fight the demon of fungus. And that really upset some people way back when, because they're like, why do we do all this elemental stuff just to deal with this demon of fungus? Well, it's explained in the story, but it was kind of weird. In Prince of the Apocalypse, the end of the adventure, you're dealing with the elemental princes, which are these mega elementals, and you have to fight them on their turf. So it does feel like a little bit better resolution to the kind of elemental aspect of it. And again, they are very interesting and very fun. So, yeah, moving on. Out of the Abyss was the third campaign that they released, and it's all about demon lords. Out of the Abyss actually starts you in the Underdark. It is an Underdark campaign, which is really, really fun and interesting. And it starts you not only in the Underdark, but you are slaves captured by drow. And so the first thing that your party has to do is you have to escape from a drow prison in the Underdark. Most of you have no idea how you got there, and the big part, none of you have any equipment. Again, you were captured, so they took everything. And so as you kind of adventure, you are in the Underdark, which is very much not player friendly. Like, everything in the Underdark is trying to kill you. And so it turns into kind of a combination survival and demon-themed campaign. You eventually get to deal with some really, really amazing demon lords, and the culmination of all that is you get to go toe-to-toe against a few demon lords, which is really, really cool and fun. And again, this is another one where happening. All of these have stuff like this, I guess I should mention, but depending on what you do during the adventure, the various demon lords that you have to deal with at the end will change and will be more powerful or less powerful. The only bad thing about Out of the Abyss is they do have a madness system, which gamifies mental illness, and I'm not a big fan of that. But other than that, it's a really interesting, fun adventure. And again, it's an Underdark campaign. Which is very, very different from kind of your standard adventure. There really aren't quote-unquote safe places in the Underdark. So every rest is dangerous, and everything you do is going to be different, and you're cut off from the surface for most of the adventure. So, yeah. Moving on. The next adventure is by far the most popular 5th edition adventure ever written. It's called Curse of Strahd, and it is amazing. It is kind of a retelling of the original Ravenloft adventure module from the 80s, which I did an entire video talking about what we could learn from the original Ravenloft. And the big thing about it was Ravenloft was one of the first heavily story-focused campaigns, or the story itself was the most important thing in there. Doesn't mean there wasn't combat or other stuff that people loved, but the story was the big selling point of it and made it very, very popular. Curse of Strahd retells that story, but kind of expands on it and adds even more interesting, amazing stuff to deal with. Another thing that's really, really cool, when you start running Curse of Strahd, one of the things you have to do is you have to do a Taroka reading. Taroka is the D&D version of a tarot. And if you purchased Curse of Strahd when it first came out, one of the things it came with was a Taroka deck. And so the thing that you use that for is you're not predicting your player's futures. What you're actually doing is when you pull each card is attached to a certain aspect of this story, and the order that you pull them in will actually describe what it is that Strahd wants in the adventure, the items, the item that is going to make it so that the players can kill him, and where that item is located. So the thing about Curse of Strahd compared to any of the other campaigns, both before and after, is you can run Curse of Strahd over and over and over again and never play the same adventure, the same exact adventure twice, because there is a randomized aspect of Curse of Strahd, and it's just an incredibly fun adventure. You're in the realm of Barovia, which is a world that's kind of subsists on suffering. Strahd is so far out of your guys' league when you first get there that there's a part of the adventure where he actually is supposed to show up, and the players have the ability to get into a fight with him. And if you do, it specifically says in there, let him do whatever he wants, but don't kill the players. Not because you're being nice to them, but make it painfully obvious that Strahd is so unimpressed with these people that it's not worth the effort to kill them. And it creates this intense, passionate hatred of Strahd by the players, because not only are they going up against someone so far outside of their ability that they're never going to be able to do anything to Strahd, but in addition to that, they kind of get the insult of, you guys are so worthless, I don't even want to kill you. There's no possible way you will ever be a threat to me. I'm just going to leave you bleeding out on the floor, have fun, and then right away. So if you're looking for a campaign to run and you like a little bit of gothic horror, Curse of Strahd is by far probably one of the best adventures ever written for 5th edition. Moving on. This is where I start kind of falling out of expertise, because I had stopped running Adventures League stuff, which is where most of these, where I got most of my experience with. I ran a little bit of Storm King's Thunder. The interesting thing about Storm King's Thunder, which is their 5th adventure, is it involves this thing called the Ordning of the Giants. In the Forgotten Realms, giants have a hierarchy. And that pecking order not only references which giants are stronger than other ones, like challenge rating wise, but it also references just how much authority they have over other giant kind and the things like that. And so what happens in the Storm King's Thunder is the Ordning, which has been set in stone for a long time, is getting reordined. And so all of the different giant factions are kind of vying to see if they can't get to a higher spot in the Ordning, so that they're no longer subservient to these other giantkin. The other thing that's interesting about Storm King's Thunder is it introduced rune magic. Specifically, some of the magic items that you can find in Storm King's Thunder are runes that you can apply to non-magic weapons to turn them into magic weapons that do things. So Storm King's Thunder does allow for the players to get a little bit fancier. Every single one of these pre-written adventures has magic items that the players can find. Storm King's Thunder really allows the players to get kind of tricksy with the magic items that they use, because they get these runes every so often that they can use to enchant armor, can enchant weapons, can do a lot of really cool things. The adventure itself is okay. It's not the most amazing adventure, and compared to Curse of Strahd, it's a bit of a letdown, but so is everything after Curse of Strahd. Yeah, that's really all I can say about that. Moving on. Tales from the Yawning Portal was the first compilation that they put out for 5th edition. Basically what it was is they just updated a bunch of old adventures for 5th edition. Those adventures are The Sunless Citadel, The Forge of Fury, The Hidden Shrine of Tamoakin, White Plume Mountains, Dead and Thay, Against the Giants, and The Tomb of Horrors. Of those adventures, White Plume Mountains is amazing. Against the Giants is another absolutely phenomenally amazing adventure. The Tomb of Horrors is the original death dungeon, and it's really, really fun, especially if you have people that don't know about the Tomb of Horrors. It can turn into an amazing... If you have players that are very, very into puzzle solving and exploration, stuff like that, the Tomb of Horrors is wonderful for that. Because while, yes, there are combat encounters, the thing about the Tomb of Horrors is it's a giant trap. And it's really, really fun. And then Dead and Thay was actually something that they did for D&D encounters while D&D 5th edition was still D&D Next. And it's just a giant mega dungeon that's really, really fun. The other ones, there's nothing particularly wrong about them. Sunless Citadel is great. Forge of Fury is great. Hidden Shrine of Words is great. Like, the rest of them are absolutely great, but those are the ones that are my absolute favorite. If you want to run one of these compilation things, most of them are listed in level order. So if you want to just run the White Plume Mountains or Dead and Thay or Tomb of Horrors, you can. But you can also link together a few of them to create your own kind of campaign while still getting to play these really fun, amazing adventures. So yeah, moving on. Tomb of Annihilation was the actual adventure book for that year, because Tales of the Yawning Portal was just mini adventures. And Tomb of Annihilation is an updated version of the Tomb of Horrors. Instead of just being one big dungeon that tries to kill you, they created an entire plot line around this device that was basically intercepting souls that died, so that when people died, they didn't actually fully die. Their spirits never left the material plane. It got stuck in this thing. And so you do get to deal with Asarak, who's a very famous lich. There's lots of undead stuff. It's a really interesting book, and there is a kind of mega dungeon in there, or there is a kind of I wouldn't say mega dungeon, but a dungeon in there that's their version of the Tomb of Horrors. My personal opinion, I think Tomb of Annihilation is a better update for an old adventure than Princes of the Apocalypse was, because it keeps most of the stuff that made the Tomb of Horrors so iconic, but then expanded it and just made it more interesting. So yeah, moving on. The next year of stuff was Waterdeep Dragon Heist and then Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage. And basically, Dragon Heist is the level 1 to 5 stuff. Dungeon of the Mad Mage is 5 to 20. So this is another one of the really high level ones. And Dungeon of the Mad Mage is literally just exploring Undermountain. Undermountain has been dealt with in the Forgotten Realms over and over and over again. This is the 5th edition version of it. Dragon Heist is kind of a I can't think of the prequel to Dungeon of the Mad Mage. The interesting thing about Dragon Heist is there are multiple kind of big bad end guys that you can deal with in Dragon Heist. And the DM actually gets to choose at the beginning of the adventure which one it's going to be. Two of the big ones that are really, really fun. Jarlaxle, who's a drow mercenary that actually has his own mercenary band, and he's really big in the Drizzt books. He could be the bad guy. Another bad guy can be Xanathar, who is the beholder that runs the Thieves Guild I think it's in Waterdeep. Which is really, really cool. Dealing with a beholder is always amazing. And so Waterdeep is Dragon Heist is another one where you can kind of replay it a few different times, and it'll be a different adventure each time. It's not quite as customized or random as Curse of Strahd, but you still have effectively 4 different flavors of the adventure. And then Dungeon of the Mad Mage is exactly what it sounds like. You know, it's a mega dungeon that has a lot of interesting stuff. So moving on. From this point forward, I don't know the adventures quite as well. Like Lost Laboratory of Qualish, if I remember correctly. Yeah, that's a short one for that's just a short one, so it's not a full adventure campaign. I think the next big adventure was Baldur's Gate: Descent into Avernus, which was another one that they redid Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which is a really cool, fun adventure from eons ago. But Baldur's Gate: Descent into Avernus was kind of a a relation to the Baldur's Gate games, though not 100%, and then also dealing with devils and the blood war in hell and stuff like that. It's a really, really cool, interesting adventure. They introduce death machines, which are basically cars. It has kind of a Mad Max feel to it, so it can be really fun. I think Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden was another one. Yeah, it was a full adventure that's all set in Icewind Dale, which, if you're not familiar with, that was the location of, I think, the first written Drizzt books. He eventually, Ari Salvador, the guy that writes all the Legend of Drizzt books, he eventually wrote a prequel trilogy to that shows where Drizzt came from. But Icewind Dale is always kind of associated with Drizzt because that was the first time that they really kind of dealt with that. And it's another adventure that was kind of an update from something that happened in the Adventures League, if I remember correctly. Because there was a short Adventures League back when it was the D&D Essentials that dealt with you dealing with the 10 towns and stuff like that. It's an interesting adventure that deals with some lesser known gods. But again, I don't know it super, super well because that was part of the time that I wasn't really running a lot of pre-written stuff. Candlekeep Mysteries isn't a campaign. It's a collection of adventures. But again, if you have players that like to go off the beaten path, inserting one of these adventures into a campaign can be a lot of fun. I've run one of them, which one was it? It wasn't the Book of the Raven, but I remember that one. I genuinely cannot remember the one I've run, but I know I've run at least one of these. All the adventures in here are really, really good and really, really interesting, and they're a nice way to again, if you have players that are kind of wandering off the beaten path, these little kind of mini adventures can be useful. And the Candlekeep Mysteries specifically are designed to be kind of just inserted into a campaign that's already going. So, yeah. Moving on. The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, I actually did an in-depth review on. It is an interesting adventure. If you like kind of the Feywild and stuff like that, it's got a lot of tricksy stuff in it. So if you have players that like kind of puzzles and tricks and stuff like that, it's by far amazing. So yeah. The Radiant Citadel and Journeys to the Radiant Citadel are not really that amazing. They're little mini adventures that are just kind of made up, that have no connection to really anything. Spelljammer, all the Spelljammer stuff, which is kind of upsetting. Spelljammer Academy, I think, is the adventure. Yeah. And I can't remember how far it goes, but Spelljammers in general is built on the idea of what if D&D but in space but not really. If you're running a Spelljammers adventure in general, you need to really accept that absurd things are going to be happening constantly. Like, that's what a Spelljammer adventure is built around. So I don't know the quality of that particular adventure because I haven't really read through it that much, but it's interesting to say the least. The next big adventure, and I think it was the last one for 5.0, was Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. In this one, again, if you're a huge Dragonlance fan, I know a lot of people that were very, very upset with how poorly they treated Dragonlance. I didn't think it was that bad, but I also don't have the nostalgia with Dragonlance. I didn't play any of the Dragonlance video games. I never read any of the books, and I wasn't playing D&D when Dragonlance was big. So I don't have the connection to Dragonlance that a lot of other people do. I thought the adventures were really interesting, and the other thing that's unique about Shadow of the Dragon Queen is there's a board game that was released at the same time that there are certain times in the adventure where you have these big, large-scale war-type battles. And you can play them just using Dungeons and Dragons. Like the adventure has outlines on how to do that. But you can also bring out the board game, and those particular battles you can actually run using the board game instead of this. And it really creates an interesting situation where and I've done this, I've tried to do this in a couple of my games, where there will be certain parts where we're no longer playing D&D, we're doing something completely different to kind of give the players something different, so that they don't always have to go, okay, well, now we get into combat and then I do this move. And so by having a kind of robust board game that you can just kind of go, okay, well, today we're doing this, it really adds and makes it a very interesting adventure. It does involve buying a board game, which is expensive. If I remember correctly, the board game itself was exorbitantly priced. Like, it was like $80 or something like that, which is because board games in general are expensive. Trying to see if I can find it here. Yeah, I don't have it. I don't have it in front of me right now, so I can't remember how much it cost. They have bundles and things like that where you can get like the book and the board game all as once and save yourself some money. But again, as far as running a pre-written campaign, Dragonlance is probably going to be the most unique pre-written campaign you can run if you are willing to do the board game. It also means you have to learn the rules of a board game. They're not exorbitantly difficult to learn, but it's a different thing that not only do you have to learn, but you have to kind of teach the players to do that for the multiple times that they will use the board game to resolve the things. But I do love it. I think it's one of the cooler adventures. And then from that point on, I mean, they have other stuff. Oh, that's the other one. Vecna, Eve of Ruin is the actual final hardcover adventure, and holy shit, did it go hard. Eve of Ruin is built around the idea that the multiverse, Vecna in and of himself, has broken away. He originally was from Greyhawk and Oerth. He eventually was able to learn how to kind of transcend that, and he can go anywhere he wants. And so Eve of Ruin touches on almost every other big adventure that has happened. And so it really does give you kind of a finality to D&D 5th edition. They have a chapter called The Dragon Queen's Pride, which is a direct reference to Rise of Tiamat and stuff like that. They have a chapter called Death House, which the introductory adventure for Curse of Strahd is called Death House. You literally get to go back to that area. There's a chapter where you get to go to Kryn, which is where the Dragonlance stuff is set. There's an entire section on Spelljammers stuff. Like, it really, really is an amazing adventure. You even get to go back to the Tomb of Horrors and everything. So as far as if you are running a game for veterans, or just people that are very familiar with Dungeons and Dragons as a whole and kind of the history of it, Vecna, Eve of Ruin is such a kind of love letter to the history of Dungeons and Dragons and of 5th edition in general, or 5th edition specifically, that it's just, there are so many really fun things. And Vecna is a truly horrifying creature to deal with, and the fight against Vecna is intense, to say the least. So yeah, and then the final compilation that I like to talk about here is Quest from the Infinite Staircase. I actually don't own this one, but I believe one of my players does because I have access to it. And this is another one where they updated old adventures, and the ones that they updated are Beyond the Crystal Cave, Expedition to Barrier Peaks, The Lost Caverns of Tsogath, and then the other ones I don't recognize. The Infinite Staircase, I don't remember. The Lost City, I believe. I remember that. When a Star Falls, I don't remember that. And Pharaoh. Pharaoh is another one I don't remember. But again, it's updated stuff. And again, Beyond the Crystal Cave is amazing. Expedition to the Barrier Peaks is another one that's really, really amazing. So yeah, those are the stuff that have been written for 5th edition big, long campaigns. There's other stuff like Scions of Elemental Evil, which is a one-shot, or Lokatha Rising and the Dragon of Icespire Peak, or all those stuff. Like, they have one shot and shorter stuff in there that they've published as well, but those are the big campaigns and kind of the stuff you could expect if you were going to run them. So I hope this was interesting for somebody. Like I said, I think running these campaigns can be a lot of fun, and most of them, if you're meeting on a fairly regular basis, most of these adventures, I mean, they were designed to be played in less than a year. That's why they came out on a yearly basis for a while. They're designed to be played in less than a year, without too much difficulty. Like, if you played once a week for a year, you could very easily get through almost all of these. The only ones that might be a little bit difficult would be probably Tyranny of Dragons and what was it called? Dungeon of the Mad Mage, because they're just longer adventures. So yeah, like, if you just we're gonna play this, it's not that, okay, for the next 7 years we're gonna be playing Curse of Strahd. It's really not. Even if you only play like once a month or something. I've seen people get through these adventures in little as 6 months. And I've seen them take as long as maybe like a year and a half to 2 years if you're not playing as often. But as long as you're playing relatively regularly, you can get through them pretty quick. And they're a ton of fun. There's a reason why Wizard of the Coast keeps putting these books out. They are fun. And the reason people keep buying them is they're fun. They are cool things to do. So, interested to hear from you guys. Anyone out there have fun stories from running pre-written adventures? Put them in the links below. And is there anyone out there that are of the belief, well, I don't run pre-written adventures? I would love to hear if this has kind of changed your mind on it, or it's still nope, I'm never running a pre-written adventure. Again, comments down below. Otherwise, again, it's all from me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.